Hi, and welcome if you've not been before. Welcome back if you have. I'm so happy to see you. And today I thought that I would share with you some of my current year students' favorite books. I teach high school seniors, and for fourth quarter, I let them select their own novel that they want to analyze. So we spend three quarters working on in-depth literary analysis and essay writing, and then for fourth quarter we take all the things that they've learned and they do that with a book of their own choosing. There are a few parameters, but not a lot. It has to be either YA or adult. It has a minimum page count. I ask that they not pick something that they've read before because I know how busy they are and it would be just too simple to rely on memory instead of actually diving in and doing the reading this time. And so every year I tend to see a handful of books become super popular, like a bunch of kids want to read them, a bunch of kids read them together. So I thought I would share with you what my kids were loving this year. And the number one pick was a big surprise. I had no kids pick it last year. I'd had a few kids pick it the year before. It's been out for a while to the point where I believe now there's 4 in the series and this is the first. So the number one book for this year with my 18-year-old students is Neal Shusterman's Scythe. This is actually our Media Center copy because I don't own this one, but the Media Center will help when we're trying to pick books. They'll give me things that are high interest that a lot of kids seem to like. And I had a kid checked this one out. The 5 others bought their own. 2 of them, as of Friday, had already bought the entire rest of the series. And one of them had already gotten to book 3 at that point. And after the kid who had checked this out of the Media Center was going that weekend to buy the rest of the series himself. So it's been really popular and they absolutely loved it. If you are unfamiliar, this is a YA utopian, but utopia and dystopia are not all that far apart. So the main premise in this is that we have cured death. Humans have cured death. No one is just dying of natural causes. No one is dying of old age. People can live, I guess, forever. But, of course, that leads to overpopulation. So people get taxed with the job of being a scythe. And so they have to go through and kind of cull, or I think the kids said it was clean, so that we don't end up with a hugely overpopulated planet. And so they loved it, absolutely loved it. And all of the kids who picked this were male this year. I've had, like I said, I had no one last year. In past years, I've had it kind of be a mixed bag. So this just surprised me on many levels. So they were all male. Most of them were kids who would claim to be non-readers or kids who read in elementary, stopped either at middle school or just before middle school, and really hadn't picked up books much until high school, until my class. And this is the one where they're coming to me and saying, thanks, I'm reading again and I'm loving it, and it was Scythe. The second most popular book amongst my students, and this didn't surprise me because this is one of my all-time favorites, was The House in the Cerulean Sea. I had 4 students select this book. 2 of them had checked it out. 2 of them had bought their own copies. One of them has gone ahead and bought the rest of, this isn't a series, but they went ahead and bought the Under the Whispering Door and In the Lives of Puppets because they just loved it. And they were very into TJ Klune now. If you are unfamiliar with this is the story of this poor, sad, lonely man named Linus. He is kind of a government employee. He works for a government agency in charge of inspecting orphanages that were made for children with special abilities. And so he gets asked by the upper management to go and inspect a specific orphanage that wasn't on any of the paperwork because these kids are supposed to be so scary and so dangerous that they're kind of off the grid. And he goes there and finds the most awesome kids on the planet. They're wonderful, and the whole book is wonderful. I have described this as a warm hug and a comfy sweater and a wonderful day in a comfy chair, all wrapped into one. It's a beautiful book. It gives you all the feels. It's a really fun read. My kids are finding a lot too. I attach to kind of the teacher aspect of people thinking great kids are just bad for reasons that don't even make sense. I think they are getting it from the kid point of view of like being misunderstood by people who have power over them, and so I think that's where they're jumping in. But all of my kids who picked it loved it, finished it, wrote some amazing papers on it, and I love this is of all of the essays that I have to read, this is the quarter that I really enjoy them because the kids get so into the books that they select, and the papers on this were great. This one I'm counting as 4, but it's actually 3 kids read this one and 1 kid read the sequel because they had already read this one, and it is One of Us is Lying by Karen McMannus. And I've had this one on the shelf for a little bit. I think I had 1 or 2 kids read it last year, and the one who had gotten it from my classroom didn't return it, so I had to get a new copy. This is a newer copy. But I've got this, and I have the sequel on my shelves. The kid who read the sequel had bought their own. A lot of my students just get their own, but this one had been checked out, and then I had a bunch, 2 others with copies of this, and then one with One of Them is Next. And so I'm gonna have to put my glasses on and read you the synopsis. Pay close attention and you might solve this. On Monday afternoon, 5 students at Bayview High School walk into detention. Bronwyn, the brain, is Yale-bound and never breaks a rule. Adley, the beauty, is the picture-perfect homecoming princess. Nate, the criminal, is already on probation for dealing. Cooper, the athlete, is the all-star baseball pitcher. And Simon, the outcast, is the creator of Bayview High's notorious gossip app. Only Simon never makes it out of the classroom. Before the end of detention, Simon is dead. And according to investigators, his death wasn't an accident. On Monday, he died. But on Tuesday, he planned to post juicy reveals about all 4 of his high-profile classmates, which makes all 4 of them suspects in his murder. Or are they just the perfect patsies for a killer who's still on the loose? Everyone has secrets, right? What really matters is how far you would go to protect them. So yes, this one the kids were loving, absolutely like. I can tell that they love them when they come to me halfway through and they've still got 2 to 3 weeks to finish the book, and they're like, I'm already finished, I'm on the next one, or I'm already finished, I'm on to reading some, I'm already finished, I loved it so much. So when they read faster than I ask them to, I know they're in it, and all of the kids read this one faster than I had asked them to. They were so into this story. And it was mixed. I had two boys, 2 girls, so it was mixed. Both, everybody who picked it absolutely loved it. This one has been popular for a couple of years now. I've had kids in the past, I tell them they have, if they want a buddy read and they and their friends all want to pick one book, they absolutely can. Last year I had 5 kids in different English classes of mine all decide they were friends, and they all decided together that they were gonna pick this one and then buddy read it as their own little group and have little meetings. It was so cute. And so, but this year I had 3 or 4 also pick it. It's another popular one. I had one student who picked it and finished it before we even started. They raced through it so fast, so they ended up reading Lucy Foley's, it's Lucy Foley. They ended up picking The Hunting Party as the book that they actually wrote about, and they read that one a lot slower, and I think because it is very much just a rough draft for this, but it is Lucy Foley's The Guest List. I think what the kids love about this is that it's got all of those multiple perspectives. It keeps you guessing. So it is a murder mystery book. It is a isolated, if you watch books like Whoa, an isolated closed circle mystery. Everybody is on this island because of the weather. They're kind of trapped. Boats can't come in, boats can't go out. So whoever does it, or whoever is the murderer, is one of them. But you also don't know at the beginning of the book who was killed. So you're getting everybody's perspectives. Everybody's got secrets. Everybody's got reasons to kill a lot of different people, and there are a lot of reasons why multiple people would be killed, and so you're just along for the ride. And my students absolutely loved this, and I heard multiple kids who of the kids who had read it and they were talking with other kids about books were like, no, go and read it as soon as it comes back on the shelf. Go find it, go read it. It's so good. So this is another one that my students absolutely adored. I had more kids into horror books this year than I have the past few. I've had a few, pre-2020, I would get horror books selected, and then the 2021 and then last year there were very few of them, and I think it's because we lived through some pretty horrible times and they weren't ready for that kind of thing. But this year I had more. I had a couple of Stephen King's. There are some new mystery horrors out in YA that popped up, and a number of kids read different ones of that. The most popular of the horror that I had was The Sundown Motel, which is a couple of years old. But I remember even when my son was in school, this one was kind of making the rounds. And so I had, I think, 3 kids pick this one. And it's great. I loved this book. I actually have it back here. I've got a hard copy on my shelf. And so that's how I ended up. I was like, no, I think they'd really like it. It's a dual timeline. It is a woman back in the 80s and then her niece 20 years later. The original woman had gone missing. She had been the front desk clerk at the Sundown Motel, and word is that the place is haunted, that something supernatural happened to her. The girl from the second timeline, her mother never got over it, never got over the loss of her sister and never knowing what happened. And so she goes back to that town and ends up getting the same job at the same hotel just so that she can try to investigate what happened to her sister. It's so good. Simone St. James, if I didn't say that earlier, is just chef's kiss at this type of story. And I've read a number of hers that follows kind of similar lines, and they've all been good. It's not been boring, like, oh, I've read that already. Like, they've always been really good. But this is my favorite of them, and my students agreed. I had this and a few of her others, but this is always the one that they take off the shelf. The last book that I had multiple kids reading was Vicious. This is the book where if I ask a lot of questions at the beginning, especially for the kids who say they don't read or haven't read in a long time, including what kind of movies do you like? Because if you like something specific in film, you tend to like it also in books. And so when kids say they really like superhero movies, this is one of the recommendations that I make is Vicious, because it is about 2 guys who were besties, best friends in college, and super, super smart. And they learned how to scientifically make themselves EOs, extraordinaries, and give themselves superpowers. But the act of doing that turned them into mortal enemies, and they both are trying to get the other one. They both think the other one doesn't need to live anymore, that the other one is dangerous to humanity. And so there's a lot of which one is really the good guy, which one's the bad guy, which one do you root for, especially if you get into the second book. This one is focused a lot more on one of the roommates than the other. You get a more even story between the two. I had 3 kids. This is another one with that, where 3 kids were reading this and 1 was reading the sequel, which is called Vengeful. But the kid reading the sequel hadn't read this. It's just that between my copy and the copies in our school media center, we were out, but I had a copy of Vengeful. And so he said, I wanted to read it so bad, I'll just go ahead and jump to the second one. And it does read okay. Yes, it's better to have read this one first, but you can just kind of jump in and enjoy the ride. And he did. He really liked it. So V.C. Andrews' Vicious, and then the sequel Vengeful. I have one, and I don't have a book to show you because I didn't have kids reading multiple copies of the same, but I will tell you the #1 author in my class, across the classes that I taught, I have 4 sections of English 4 honors, and it was Colleen Hoover. I had 7 kids, 2 boys and 5 girls, all reading Colleen Hoover books, but for the most part they were reading all sorts of different ones. So I had It Ends With Us, I had It Begins With Us, I had Hopeless, I had a Verity, and I can't remember but they were all different. Everybody was reading a different one, but I will tell you, of just watching kids walk through the halls with a book, Colleen Hoover is by far the top book. I see the Shatter Me series. None of my students picked Shatter Me. I don't know if that's no longer like the series anymore, but I didn't get any of those. But I see Colleen Hoover books, I see kids passing it around and sharing it with friends, and I see it kind of making the round through the kids, and absolutely Colleen Hoover was my students' favorite author out of all of the choices that they were able to make. And they all really enjoyed it. Not a one of them came to me and said, I picked the wrong book, can I change? Like, that never happened. Everybody loved what they read. And so I hope you enjoyed that. I hope it was insightful. I hope if you're here because you have someone in the 17 to 19 age range who would like to read but doesn't quite know where to start, I hope I gave you a good suggestion or two of something that they might enjoy. And I hope you're having an absolutely wonderful day, and I can't wait to see you again. Now go and read some really good books.